A 7-month pregnant wife, a Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park, and a love story that magazines called a modern fairy tale. Yasmin Redford had it all. Her husband, tech billionaire Howard Redford, was the man who had everything, and he'd given it all to her. So when he told her he was flying to St. Bart's for a final solitary retreat before their baby arrived, she kissed him goodbye. But billionaires don't fly commercial, and when a private jet's manifest is leaked, secrets have nowhere to hide. Howard wasn't alone. He was with his mistress on a lavish Babymoon celebrating a different baby. What he didn't know was that while he was sipping champagne at 40,000 feet, his pregnant wife was meeting with the most ruthless divorce attorney in New York. The divorce papers were already drafted. The courier was already booked. And paradise was about to become a prison. The city lights of Manhattan glittered below the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse, a sprawling universe of captured stars. To Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, they were just part of the wallpaper of her life, a life so meticulously curated for perfection, it felt at times like a museum exhibit. She was the primary installation, the beautiful, intelligent wife of Howard Redford, the boy wonder of the fintech world. At 33, Howard was a force of nature. He had the restless energy of a man who believed he could bend the world to his will, and the track record to prove it. His company, Nexus Capital, had revolutionized algorithmic trading, making him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost unfair. Sharp jaw eyes, the color of a stormy sea that held a perpetual spark of ambition, and a smile that could disarm world leaders and charm seasoned investors with equal ease. They had met at a charity gala 5 years prior. Yasmin, then a rising star in the art curation world, possessed a quiet grace and a formidable intellect that Howard found captivating. She wasn't just another socialite drawn to his flame. She challenged him, debated with him, and saw the man behind the myth. Her family, the Vanderbilts, were old money steeped in traditions, and a quiet, unshakable influence that made Howard's new money flashiness seem almost crude in comparison. Their union was a merger of dynasties, a storybook romance that graced the covers of Vogue and Forbes simultaneously. Their home was a testament to their combined aesthetics. Howard's sleek minimalist tech seamlessly integrated with Yasmin's priceless collection of contemporary art and antique furniture. It was a palace in the sky on the 78th floor of 157, a monument to their success, their power, their love. And now, at 29, Yasmin was 7 months pregnant with their first child, a son. The final piece of the perfect picture was about to be set in place. She ran a hand over the gentle, firm swell of her belly, a protective primal gesture that had become second nature. The baby kicked, a fluttering reminder of the new life she was nurturing. She smiled, a genuine, unguarded expression that rarely made it past the fortress of her public composure. "He's active tonight," she'd said an hour ago, hoping to draw Howard away from the holographic stock ticker glowing faintly in his home office. Howard had looked up, his focus slow to shift. "That's my boy, already planning his market takeover." He'd smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. His gaze was distant, his mind clearly still crunching numbers and closing deals a world away. This distance was a new thing, a subtle but persistent chill that had crept into their gilded cage over the past few months. At first, Yasmin had dismissed it as stress. Nexus Capital was in the middle of a massive global expansion, and Howard was pushing himself, as always, to the brink. There were more late nights at the office, more hushed phone calls taken in rooms he'd just exited, more weekends consumed by emergency board meetings. "It's the final push, darling," he'd assured her, stroking her hair, as she lay beside him in their cavernous bed. "Once the Asia deal is closed, it's just you and me and the little guy. I promise." Yasmin, wanting to believe him, had accepted it. She was a supportive wife, the anchor to his stratospheric ambition. But a thread of unease had been pulled, and now she couldn't stop it from unraveling the tapestry of their perfect life. The real shift, the one that planted a seed of cold dread in her heart, had a name: Chloe Sterling. Chloe was Howard's new protege. a 25-year-old coding prodigy from MIT. She was brilliant, beautiful, and possessed an ambition that mirrored Howard's own. He spoke of her with a reverence that bordered on obsessive. "She sees the market in a way no one else does," he'd say. "She's the future of the company." Yasmin had met her once at a company dinner. Chloe was a whirlwind of youthful energy with wide, doe-like eyes and a cascade of raven hair. She hung on Howard's every word, her hand brushing his arm a little too often, her laughter a little too loud, a little too intimate. Yasmin, a connoisseur of social subtleties, had recognized the performance instantly. It was the calculated, hungry ambition of a predator disguised as hero worship. She had felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. When she had gently mentioned to Howard that Chloe's professional admiration seemed to blur boundaries, he had become uncharacteristically defensive. "Don't be ridiculous, Yasmin," he'd snapped, his voice sharp. "You're being insecure. She's a kid. She's vital to the company. I can't have you making my top talent feel uncomfortable because you're feeling hormonal." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and dismissive. Hormonal. He had never spoken to her like that before. It was a dismissal not just of her concern, but of her perception of her very reality. The argument had escalated their first real venomous fight. They had reconciled, of course, with Howard, apologizing profusely, blaming his stress, and buying her a breathtaking diamond bracelet from Harry Winston as a peace offering. She wore it now, its cold weight a constant glittering reminder of that crack in their foundation. Tonight the unease was a physical presence in the silent penthouse. Howard was packing. He had announced it 2 days ago. "I need a break before the baby comes," he'd said, avoiding her eyes as he stared out at the city. "Just a few days to clear my head. I've booked a trip. St. Bart's. Just me. I need to disconnect to come back ready to be a father." Yasmin's heart had constricted. St. Bart's was their place. It was where he had proposed on the pristine white sands of Saline Beach. The thought of him there alone felt wrong, a desecration of a shared memory. Why alone? "Howard," she had asked, her voice quiet. "We could go together. A babymoon. Most couples do that." "You can't fly, Yasmin," he'd replied quickly, a little too quickly. "Doctor's orders. It's too close to your due date. It's not safe." She knew he was right about the flying restrictions, but the excuse felt hollow, a prepackaged, convenient truth. Still, she had relented. To fight him on it would only push him further away, would only validate his accusation of her being insecure and controlling. So she had smiled, helped him choose what to pack, and pretended to be the understanding, supportive wife. Now she stood in the doorway of their enormous walk-in closet, a space larger than most Manhattan apartments. Howard was carefully folding a lightweight linen shirt into his designer suitcase. He was packing for warm weather, for relaxation, for paradise. But as he reached into the back of his drawer, he palmed a small, unfamiliar box, and thinking she wasn't looking, slipped it into the side pocket of his carry-on. It wasn't a watch box or a cufflink box. It was smaller, more delicate. The size of a box for a woman's necklace, or perhaps a ring. Yasmin's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. She said nothing. She simply watched her mind a maelstrom of denial and terrifying certainty. He was going to St. Bart's, their special place, but he was not going alone. And he was bringing a gift. She retreated silently from the doorway, her hand protectively on her belly. The baby kicked again, harder this time, as if sensing his mother's distress. In the reflection of the vast dark window, Yasmin saw herself, a woman standing on the precipice of a great fall, the glittering city lights behind her no longer looking like stars, but like the cold, indifferent eyes of a world that was about to watch her perfect life shatter into a million pieces. The gilded cage had become a trap, and she was just beginning to realize the door had been locked from the outside. The kiss Howard gave her at the door was as fleeting as it was cold, a ghost of a touch against her cheek. "I'll call you when I land, darling," he said, the endearment sounding rehearsed. I love you. I love you too. Yasmin whispered the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. She watched the elevator doors slide shut, encasing him in polished brass, and the finality of it felt like a guillotine's drop. The silence he left behind was immense, a roaring vacuum where the hum of his presence used to be. For an hour, she did nothing. She simply stood in the grand foyer, her hand resting on a cool marble console table, her mind refusing to process the implications of the little box and the distant look in her husband's eyes. Denial was a warm, comforting blanket, and she wanted to wrap herself in it to sleep until he came back and proved her fears were nothing more than the paranoid fantasies of a hormonal pregnant woman. But Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford was not a woman who wallowed in denial for long. Her breeding, her education, her very nature were rooted in analysis and action. She had managed art galleries, negotiated with ruthless collectors, and navigated the treacherous social waters of New York's elite. She was a strategist. With a newfound icy resolve, she walked into Howard's home office. The room was his sanctuary, a temple of chrome and black leather. His primary desktop computer was locked, protected by a password so complex it was likely a string of code. But Howard was a creature of habit, and in his arrogance, convenience often trumped security. His personal laptop sat on the corner of the desk, still logged in. Her hands trembled as she moved the mouse. The screen flickered to life, showing a half-finished email to his legal team about the Asia expansion. Her guilt was a sharp stabbing pain, but her suspicion was a roaring fire that consumed it. Where to even begin his emails? His calendar. She started with his browser history. Her eyes scanned the list, mostly financial news sites, tech blogs, and links to Nexus Capital's internal servers. Then she saw it. A series of searches from the past week, all centered around St. Bart's. Best private villas. St. Bart's, chef-catered meals. St. Bart's, jewelry stores. Gustavia Cartier, Trinity, necklace price. And then the one that made her breath catch in her throat. St. Bart's, medical clinic, obstetrics. The word pulsed on the screen. Why would he be looking up pregnancy-related medical care in St. Bart's? He had told her she couldn't fly. The only possible reason was that he was going with someone else who was pregnant. The pieces slammed together in her mind with brutal, sickening force. The distant behavior, the constant talk of his brilliant protégé. Chloe. The late nights weren't about work. They were about her. The hushed calls weren't to his board. They were to his mistress. The little box wasn't for a future surprise for Yasmin. It was a Cartier necklace for the other woman he had gotten pregnant. The Babymoon he was taking wasn't to prepare for fatherhood with his wife. It was to celebrate a new family he was starting with his employee. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself, a low, wounded sound escaping her lips. The betrayal was absolute, a multi-layered act of cruelty so profound it was almost elegant in its depravity. He wasn't just cheating. He was replacing her. He was taking their special place, their Babymoon, their future, and giving it to someone else. Her grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Tears streamed down her face, hot and silent. The life she had built, the man she loved, the future she was carrying in her womb, it was all a lie. A meticulously constructed, beautifully presented lie. But then through the fog of pain, a different feeling began to surface. It started as a spark in the pit of her stomach and grew into a wildfire of pure, unadulterated rage. It was the fury of a woman scorned, yes. But more than that, it was the protective rage of a mother. This man, her husband, was not just betraying her. He was betraying their unborn son. He was creating a world of chaos and deception for his child before he even took his first breath. Yasmin wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her expression hardening. She was not a victim to be pitied. She was a Vanderbilt. She was a Redford, and she would not be erased. She returned to the laptop, her movements now precise and clinical. She needed more than just suspicion. She needed undeniable proof. She navigated to a travel folder she knew he kept. It was filled with itineraries from his past business trips. And there it was. A new file created 2 weeks ago. SBH Retreat. She clicked it open. The confirmation was for a 7-night stay at the Elysian Villas, the most exclusive and private resort on the island, a place so luxurious it made their usual 5-star haunts look common. The booking was for the Villa Serafina, a secluded 3-bedroom compound with a private beach, a full staff and an infinity pool that melted into the Caribbean Sea. And then she saw the flight details. A private Gulfstream G650 chartered from a discreet aviation firm. Her eyes scanned the passenger manifest. 2 names, Howard Redford, Chloe Sterling. There it was, the black and white indisputable proof. Her heart didn't break this time. It turned to stone. She saved a copy of the entire itinerary to a hidden file on a secure cloud server she had maintained since her gallery days. She photographed the screen with her phone. Evidence. She thought about what to do next. Call him, confront him when he returned. The thought of a screaming match, of his inevitable gaslighting and false apologies, filled her with disgust. It was beneath her. It was unproductive. A messy emotional confrontation was what he would expect. He would use her pregnancy, her hormones, against her. He would try to manage the situation to control the narrative just as he controlled everything else. No, she would not give him that satisfaction. She would not play his game. She would invent a new one with new rules. Her mind went to her prenuptial agreement. At the time, it had felt like a formality, a distasteful but necessary piece of paperwork for a man of Howard's wealth. Her own family lawyer had insisted on certain clauses. Clauses Yasmin had barely paid attention to. She remembered one specifically, an infidelity clause. It was ironclad. In the event of proven adultery, the division of assets shifted dramatically in her favor. Her lawyer, a shrewd old man named Samuel Blackwood, had called it the Apocalypse Clause. At the time she had laughed. Now it was her weapon. But Samuel was a family friend, gentle and diplomatic. She needed more than that. She needed a warrior. She needed someone who would not just handle a divorce, but orchestrate a takedown. There was only one name that came to mind. A name whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence in the elite circles of New York. Eleanor Vance. Vance wasn't just a lawyer. She was a legend, a titan of matrimonial law who had dismantled the empires of some of the most powerful men in the country. She was brilliant, ruthless, and devastatingly expensive. She took on only a handful of cases a year, and she never lost. Yasmin stood up, her back straight, her resolve absolute. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Howard thought he was in paradise, celebrating his new life. He had no idea he was flying into the eye of a hurricane. A hurricane named Yasmin. She picked up her phone not to call her husband, but to make the most important call of her life. She found the number for Eleanor Vance's private office. As the phone began to ring, she looked out the window again. The city lights no longer seemed indifferent. They seemed like an army waiting for her command. Eleanor Vance's office. A crisp voice answered. "My name is Yasmin Redford," she said, her voice steady and clear, devoid of any tremble. "I need to schedule an immediate and confidential consultation with Ms. Vance. It's a matter of some urgency." The game was on. The offices of Vance and Associates were located in the Seagram building on Park Avenue, a masterpiece of corporate modernism that projected an aura of untouchable power. The interior was surprisingly serene, decorated in muted tones of gray cream and slate. It was a place designed to calm frayed nerves and focus the mind on the cold, hard calculus of divorce. Yasmin was led into a corner office with a panoramic view of the city. Eleanor Vance rose from behind a large, imposing desk made of polished obsidian. She was a woman in her late 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored Armani suit. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp geometric bob, and her eyes, behind a pair of severe-looking glasses, were the color of chips of ice. They missed nothing. "Mrs. Redford," she said, her voice a low, modulated instrument of command. She didn't offer a handshake but gestured to the chair opposite her desk. "Thank you for coming in. Your call was compelling." Yasmin sat placing her crocodile Hermes bag beside her. She felt a strange sense of calm. In this room with this woman, her chaotic emotions were liabilities. Only facts mattered. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Ms. Vance. Please, call me Eleanor. In my experience, urgency of this nature means the stakes are high. So tell me, Yasmin, why are you here?" Without preamble, Yasmin laid out the story. She spoke with a detached precision that belied the raw wound in her soul. She detailed Howard's recent behavior, the discovery of his secret relationship with Chloe Sterling, the damning evidence on his laptop, the resort booking the private jet, manifest the search history for prenatal care and Cartier necklaces. She spoke of their assets, the penthouse, the art collection, the shares in Nexus Capital, held in her name as part of their marital agreement. She concluded by mentioning the infidelity clause in her prenup. Throughout her account, Eleanor Vance was perfectly still. She didn't take notes. She simply listened, her icy gaze fixed on Yasmin's face, absorbing every detail, every nuance. When Yasmin finished, a long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor leaned forward slightly. "And your husband is at this moment at the Elysian Villas in St. Bart's with his pregnant mistress." "That is correct," Yasmin confirmed. "He believes you are at home awaiting his return, none the wiser." "Yes." Eleanor's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It was not a smile of warmth, but of appreciation for a particularly interesting strategic problem. "Good," she said softly. "The element of surprise is our greatest asset. Most women in your position would have called him screaming. They would have given him time to hide assets, to create a counter-narrative, to prepare for war. You did not. That tells me you are not most women." Yasmin felt a flicker of pride. "I have no intention of letting him control this." "Excellent," Eleanor said, her voice gaining a steely edge. "Because we are not going to file for divorce in the traditional way. A quiet filing gives him time to react, to move his money through the labyrinthine shell corporations men like your husband are so fond of. No, we are going to execute what I like to call a decapitation strike." She stood up and walked to the window, her back to Yasmin as she surveyed the city below. "We will file a petition for dissolution of marriage with the New York Supreme Court first thing tomorrow morning. Simultaneously, we will file an ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order. This is key. We will ask the judge to freeze every known asset: bank accounts, brokerage accounts, credit cards, property titles, personal and corporate. We will argue that there is a significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. A fancy way of saying your billionaire husband is about to hide his money now that he's been caught. Given that he is currently out of the country with his paramour, on whom he is clearly spending lavishly, the judge will almost certainly grant it." Yasmin listened, captivated by the cold, brutal efficiency of the plan. Eleanor turned back to face her. "The order, once signed by the judge, will be transmitted electronically to every financial institution. By midday tomorrow, Howard Redford will be a billionaire on paper, but he won't be able to buy a cup of coffee. His corporate accounts at Nexus Capital will be frozen. Payroll, vendor payments, everything. The company will be paralyzed. This will force him to the negotiating table immediately and on our terms." The scale of it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a divorce. It was a corporate siege. "He'll be furious," Yasmin breathed. "That is the point," Eleanor replied. "A furious man makes mistakes. A panicked man gives concessions. We want him shocked, stranded, and powerless. Which brings me to the delivery." She returned to her desk and fixed Yasmin with an intense look. "We will not have a grubby process server from the city accost him. This needs to be a moment of maximum psychological impact. We will hire a high-end international courier service. A professional in a suit will arrive at his private villa in paradise. They will hand-deliver a package containing the summons, the divorce petition, and a copy of the judge's freezing order. He will be sunning himself with his mistress one moment and financially castrated the next. A vision flashed in Yasmin's mind. Howard poolside, his confident smile dissolving into disbelief and horror. The satisfaction was a dark, heady poison. "There is one more thing," Eleanor continued, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I want you to write him a note. A short one. To be included in the package. Nothing emotional. Nothing angry. Just a simple, clear message that this is your decision. It's important that the final blow comes from you." The next 24 hours were a blur of focused activity. Yasmin worked tirelessly with Eleanor's team of forensic accountants and legal aides. She provided them with every piece of financial information she had. Account numbers, she had memorized names of his private bankers, details of their property holdings in London and the Hamptons. She proved to be a formidable resource, her mind sharp and her memory for detail exact. Her years of managing multi-million-dollar art acquisitions had made her fluent in the language of money and assets. As the legal machinery churned, Yasmin felt a profound shift within herself. The grief, while still present, was packed away in a locked room in her heart. In its place was a cold, driving purpose. She was no longer just Yasmin Redford, the wife. She was a general commanding an army, moving pieces on a chessboard of immense consequence. She did it all while fielding Howard's daily calls from St. Bart's. "Hello, darling," he'd said on the first call, his voice breezy and warm. "The weather is incredible. You would love it. I wish you were here." "I wish I were there, too," she'd replied, her voice a perfect imitation of wistful longing. The ease with which she lied was terrifying, a skill she hadn't known she possessed. She was a performer, just like Chloe. "How are you feeling? How's the little guy?" "We're fine," she said, one hand on her belly. "Just missing you." Each lie was a small piece of her soul chipping away, but she held firm. She was protecting her son, building a firewall around their future. On the morning the papers were to be filed, Yasmin sat at her own desk, a delicate antique piece of furniture that stood in stark contrast to the brutal modernity of Howard's office. She took out a sheet of her personalized cream-colored stationery. Her handwriting, usually a graceful flowing script, was now tight and controlled. Eleanor had advised her to be concise. She thought for a long time, the pen hovering over the paper. What could she say to the man who was the love of her life and the architect of her greatest pain? In the end, she wrote only 2 sentences. 2 sentences that conveyed everything he needed to know. "Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Bart's. Yasmin." She sealed the note in its matching envelope. It was the most civilized and yet the most savage thing she had ever done. Late that afternoon, Eleanor called. "The judge has signed the order," she said, a note of triumph in her voice. "The wire transfers to the banks are complete. The assets are frozen. The courier is on a flight to St. Martin and will take a private charter to St. Bart's. He will deliver the package to Villa Serafina tomorrow at noon local time." Yasmin hung up the phone. It was done. The storm she had gathered was about to make landfall. She walked over to the vast window and looked down at the city. Far below, a yellow taxi, impossibly small, navigated the canyons of steel and glass. She felt a kinship with it, a small but determined entity moving with purpose through a world of giants. Howard had once told her that in his business, timing was everything. You had to know the exact moment to strike to ensure maximum gain. It seemed she had learned his lessons well. Tomorrow at noon, in his sun-drenched paradise, Howard Redford would learn that his wife was a much better student than he had ever imagined. The Caribbean sun was a benevolent god, casting a brilliant, warm glow over the island of St. Bart's. In the exclusive enclave of the Elysian Villas, perched high on the cliffs overlooking Governor Beach Paradise, was a tangible reality. At Villa Serafina, the sound was of gentle waves kissing a private stretch of sand, the clinking of ice in crystal glasses, and the soft, satisfied laughter of its 2 occupants. Howard Redford lay on a plush white sun lounger, a picture of contented masculinity. He had shed the tension of New York like a heavy coat. His skin was bronzed, his eyes shielded by designer sunglasses were closed in blissful repose. Beside him, Chloe Sterling glowed. Her pregnancy, just entering its 5th month, was a neat, compact bump under her stylish bikini. She ran a hand through her dark hair, her eyes sparkling with a triumphant light as she gazed at the man beside her. "Isn't it perfect, Jules?" she murmured, leaning over to kiss his shoulder. "Just perfect. Almost perfect," he said, opening his eyes and smiling at her. He reached into the beach bag beside him and pulled out the small navy blue Cartier box. This might help. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. She opened the box to reveal the Trinity necklace, 3 intertwined bands of rose yellow and white gold. It was delicate, iconic, and impossibly expensive. "Oh, Howard," she breathed, her eyes welling with tears. "It's beautiful." "A symbol," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "For us. For our new beginning. A new family." He conveniently ignored the fact that he was still married, that he had a wife 7 months pregnant with his firstborn son in New York. In this sun-drenched bubble, that Yasmin felt a million miles away. Here with Chloe, he was reborn, unshackled from the weight of old money and tradition that Yasmin represented. Chloe was his future, a reflection of his own voracious ambition. As he fastened the necklace around her neck, a man appeared at the edge of the terrace. He was dressed not in resort wear, but in a lightweight gray business suit. He held a sleek leather portfolio. He was discreet, professional, and utterly out of place. Jean-Pierre, the villa's butler, followed a step behind him, looking flustered. "Monsieur Redford, my apologies." This gentleman insisted. "A delivery for you." Howard's brow furrowed in annoyance. "I'm not expecting anything." The courier stepped forward. "Mr. Howard Redford?" he asked, his accent vaguely European. "Yes." Howard answered, his tone clipped. "I have an urgent personal delivery for you from New York." He extended the thick document-sized envelope. It was heavy, official-looking. Howard sighed, taking the package. He assumed it was from his office, some tedious document the board needed him to sign. "Fine, thank you," he said dismissively, placing it on the table beside him, intending to ignore it. "Sir," the courier said, not moving, "my instructions are to wait until you have personally opened the package and acknowledged its contents." Howard shot him a look of pure irritation. The arrogance of it was astounding. "Instructions from whom?" "From the office of Eleanor Vance, on behalf of your wife, Mrs. Yasmin Redford." The name hit Howard like a physical blow. Eleanor Vance. He knew that name. Every billionaire in New York knew that name. It was a name synonymous with ruin. And then on behalf of your wife, Yasmin. The blood drained from his face. The warm, benevolent sun suddenly felt cold and menacing. Chloe, sensing the drastic shift in his demeanor, sat up straight, her hand protectively on the new necklace. "Jules, what is it? Who is Eleanor Vance?" Howard didn't answer. His hands, suddenly clumsy, fumbled with the clasp of the envelope. He tore it open, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The first document he pulled out was a summons to the Supreme Court of the State of New York. The bold letters at the top screamed at him. Petition for dissolution of marriage. He stared at it, his mind refusing to comprehend the words. Divorce. Yasmin was divorcing him. How could she possibly know he had been so careful? His mind raced, trying to find a foothold in the crumbling reality. It had to be a bluff, a misunderstanding. But then he saw the next document. It was dozens of pages long. The motion for the temporary restraining order. He scanned the text, his eyes catching phrases that made his stomach clench. Irrefutable evidence of adultery. Significant risk of dissipation of marital assets. Commingling of funds for the purposes of extramarital activities. Attached to the back were the exhibits. Exhibit A. A copy of the flight manifest for the private jet with his name and Chloe Sterling's. Exhibit B. The reservation confirmation for the Villa Serafina. Exhibit C. A printout of his internet search history. He felt a profound, sickening sense of exposure. She knew everything. Chloe, now deeply alarmed, tried to read the papers over his shoulder. "Howard, what is going on?" He waved her away, his focus entirely on the final damning document. The judge's order. It was stamped signed. He read the operative paragraphs, and the world tilted on its axis. It is hereby ordered that all personal and corporate bank accounts, brokerage accounts, and lines of credit listed in Exhibit D, held in the name of Howard Redford and/or Yasmin Vanderbilt Redford, are hereby frozen. It is further ordered that all assets of Nexus Capital LLC are hereby frozen, pending a full accounting of marital funds. Frozen. All of it. The word echoed in the sudden ringing silence of his mind. He was sitting in a $50,000 a night villa, a billionaire on paper, and he suddenly didn't have a dollar to his name. His hand trembled as he reached for the last item in the envelope. It was a single sheet of cream-colored stationery, Yasmin's stationery. He recognized her elegant, precise handwriting. He read the two short, devastating sentences. "Howard, I know about Chloe. I know about the baby. Enjoy St. Bart's. Yasmin." It was the polite, calm civility of the note that shattered him completely. It wasn't the note of a hysterical, heartbroken woman. It was the note of an executioner. Cold, final, absolute. He dropped the papers which scattered across the sun-drenched stone. He lunged for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unlock it. He tried to open his banking app. A red banner flashed across the screen. Account access restricted by court order. He tried his corporate account. The same message. He tried his personal Centurion card. He pulled up the app. Card suspended. Panic, cold and suffocating, seized him. He was trapped. Stranded in paradise with his mistress, with no access to the money that defined his entire existence. Nexus. Capital, his empire was paralyzed. Payroll was due next week for thousands of employees. His deals, his reputation. Everything was about to implode. Howard Chloe's voice was sharp, panicked. She had picked up the divorce papers. She knows about the baby. What does this mean? Assets frozen? Howard didn't answer her. He was staring out at the impossibly blue sea, but he didn't see it. He saw only the calm, disappointed face of his wife. The wife he had underestimated. The wife he had dismissed as hormonal and insecure. The quiet, graceful woman who had just brought his entire world crashing down around him with nothing more than a pen and a phone call. The courier who had been watching the scene unfold with professional detachment finally spoke. "Mr. Redford, do you acknowledge receipt?" Howard slowly turned his head, his face a mask of disbelief and impotent rage. He felt a primal scream building in his chest, a roar of fury at his own stupidity, at Yasmin's unexpected treachery. He had come to paradise to celebrate a new beginning, but he had walked directly into the meticulously planned end of his life as he knew it. And the worst part, the part that twisted in his gut like a knife, was the chilling finality of her note. Enjoy St. Bart's. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a curse. The paradise of Villa Serafina transformed into a luxurious prison cell almost instantly. The serene bubble of sun, sea, and champagne popped, leaving behind the acrid smell of panic and recrimination. Howard's first instinct, the instinct of a man used to solving every problem with his checkbook, was to fight, to call his lawyers, his bankers, his board members. He stabbed at his phone, dialing his lead attorney at Nexus Capital. The call went to voicemail. He tried his personal wealth manager at Goldman Sachs. Voicemail. He soon realized the horrifying scope of Eleanor Vance's strategy. The court order wouldn't have just gone to the banks. It would have gone to his key personnel, advising them that all communication regarding financial matters was to be directed through Vance's office. He was cut off, isolated. Chloe, her initial shock curdling into fear, watched him pace the terrace like a caged tiger. The Cartier necklace felt like a cold weight on her skin. Now no longer a trophy, but a brand. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How are we supposed to pay for this place? How are we getting home? Don't you think I'm trying to figure that out?" Howard snarled, turning on her. The charm he had cultivated was gone, stripped away to reveal the raw, desperate man beneath. "This is your fault. My fault." Chloe shot back, her doe eyes flashing with anger. "You're the one who was married. You told me she was fragile, that you were going to leave her after the baby was born. You said you had it all under control." "I did have it under control," he roared. "But I underestimated her. I underestimated what she was capable of." Their argument spiraled, the beautiful fantasy of their future dissolving into a bitter blame game. All the while, the sun continued to shine and the waves continued to crash, indifferent to the implosion of their affair. Back in New York, Yasmin was the picture of calm control. She sat with Eleanor Vance in the lawyer's obsidian-walled office, monitoring the fallout. Eleanor's phone had been ringing incessantly. Panicked calls from Nexus Capital's board members, from Howard's army of financial advisors, even from the charter jet company, demanding to know how they would be paid for the return flight from St. Bart's. Eleanor handled each call with surgical precision. "Mr. Redford's assets are under a court-ordered freeze," she would state calmly. "All inquiries are to be directed to my office in writing." "No, I cannot authorize any payments at this time. He's trapped." Yasmin said, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "For now," Eleanor cautioned. "Men like your husband are cornered animals. He will get creative. He will find a line of credit call in a favor from someone off the books. Our goal wasn't to strand him forever, but to force his hand. He will have to negotiate. And when he does, he will be negotiating from a position of absolute weakness." The first twist came 2 days later. Howard, having exhausted all his official channels, made a desperate call to a man he knew from his early, hungrier days, a shadowy private equity magnate named Marcus Thorne, with a reputation for operating in the gray areas of international finance. Howard begged for a short-term, high-interest loan, just enough to get home and mount a legal defense. Marcus Thorne agreed, but the price was steep. It wasn't just interest he wanted, it was information. He wanted inside knowledge of Nexus Capital's proprietary trading algorithms, the crown jewels of Howard's empire. Cornered and desperate, Howard agreed. What Howard didn't know was that Marcus Thorne had a silent partner in his equity firm, a partner who had been feeding him information about Howard for months, waiting for the perfect moment of vulnerability to strike. That partner was Yasmin's father, Harrison Vanderbilt. Harrison, a man of immense quiet power from the world of old money, had always distrusted Howard. He saw him as a flashy, arrogant upstart who didn't deserve his daughter. When Yasmin had come to him, not for help, but simply to inform him of her plan, he had put his own chess pieces in motion. He knew Howard's type. When cornered, he would turn to someone like Thorne. Harrison's investment in Thorne's firm gave him a listening post right inside Howard's desperate plea. The call was recorded, providing Eleanor with undeniable proof that Howard was attempting to sell off corporate secrets, which were also marital assets, in direct violation of the court order. Contempt of court. Eleanor set a predatory gleam in her eye as she listened to the recording. "This is beautiful. We can use this to strip him of his control over the company entirely. We can petition the judge to appoint an independent receiver to run Nexus Capital." The second, more personal twist came from Chloe Sterling herself. After 2 days of being trapped with a furious, broke Howard, the fantasy was well and truly over. She saw the man he was without his money, volatile, selfish, and weak. Using the villa's Wi-Fi, she did something she should have done months ago. She researched Eleanor Vance, and in her research she found articles about another of Vance's famous cases, a case involving a faked pregnancy and a fraudulent claim on a wealthy industrialist. A seed of an idea began to form. Chloe contacted Eleanor Vance's office, directly requesting a secret meeting. She claimed to have information that would be invaluable to Yasmin's case. Yasmin, against Eleanor's initial advice, agreed to a video call. She needed to see the woman who had tried to destroy her life. On the screen, Chloe looked pale and diminished, the confident glow completely gone. Mrs. Redford. Yasmin. She began, her voice shaky. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I am not the monster you think I am. Howard. He lied to me. He told me your marriage was over, a loveless arrangement. He said you were emotionally unstable. And you chose to believe him. Yasmin asked, her voice like ice. I was a fool, Chloe admitted. But I'm also pregnant with his child, and now he is ruined and I am trapped. I want to help you. In exchange for consideration. What kind of consideration? Eleanor cut in, her tone sharp. A settlement, Chloe said, finding a sliver of her old confidence. A trust fund for my child. And in return, I will testify that Howard was actively planning to defraud you. That this entire Babymoon was a precursor to him hiding assets in offshore accounts under my name. I have emails. He was careless. Yasmin looked at the young woman on the screen. She saw the desperation, the calculated self-interest. It was a tempting offer. Chloe's testimony would cement their case and utterly ruin Howard. But something in Yasmin's gut told her to be cautious. Her motherly instinct was screaming. Chloe, Yasmin said, her voice softening slightly. Before we discuss any deals, I want one thing. A doctor in St. Bart's is going to come to your villa. He will perform an ultrasound. I want to see the image of my husband's child. Chloe's face froze. A flicker of pure panic shot through her eyes before she masked it. That's an invasion of my privacy. It's a condition of any negotiation, Yasmin stated flatly. No scan, no deal. You have 1 hour to agree. Yasmin ended the call. The silence in the room was thick with tension. You think she's lying? Eleanor asked. I think, Yasmin said, her hand on her own very real kicking belly, that a woman who is truly 5 months pregnant doesn't panic at the thought of an ultrasound. An hour later, the call came not from Chloe, but from a frantic Howard. Marcus Thorne had informed him that their deal was off, that Harrison Vanderbilt was involved, and that he was now facing contempt charges. He was broken. Yasmin, please, he begged, his voice cracking. I'll do anything. I'll give you whatever you want. Just call this off. You've destroyed me. You destroyed us, Howard, she replied, her voice devoid of emotion. You did this. As he continued to plead, an email dinged in Eleanor's inbox. It was from the international courier service they had used. The man who delivered the papers had submitted his final expense report. He noted that upon leaving the villa, he had passed the trash receptacle at the end of the long driveway. Sticking out of the top was the distinctive navy blue Cartier box. He had thought nothing of it, but in light of the high-profile nature of the case, decided to mention it. He also attached a photo from his phone. Eleanor opened the image and turned the screen toward Yasmin. It showed the empty Cartier box, but lying beside it in the trash was something else. A small silicone prosthetic. The kind used by actresses, or perhaps by a woman trying to convincingly fake a pregnancy bump. It was the final ugly piece of the puzzle. Chloe wasn't pregnant. She had never been pregnant. The search for obstetrics in St. Bart's wasn't for her care. It was likely Howard researching what a real 5-month pregnancy should look like. The entire affair, the baby, that was the foundation of their new life, was a complete and utter fraud, a scam designed to entrap a billionaire. And Howard, in his arrogance and ego, had fallen for it completely. Yasmin looked at the picture, then back at the city skyline. Her husband hadn't just betrayed her for another woman. He had betrayed her for a lie, a cheap, pathetic illusion. The rage and grief she had been holding back finally receded, replaced by a profound, almost pitiful sense of clarity. He wasn't a monster. He was a fool. And his empire was crumbling not because of a grand passion, but because of a grand deception he had been too blind to see. Her phone buzzed again. It was Howard calling for the 10th time. She silenced the call and looked at Eleanor. "It's over," Yasmin said. "Let's finish this." The end wasn't a fiery explosion, but the quiet, deliberate dismantling of a life. Armed with proof of Howard's attempted fraud and Chloe's deception, Yasmin held all the cards. The divorce settlement was not a negotiation, it was a surrender. Yasmin retained the Manhattan penthouse, the art collection, and a controlling interest in Nexus Capital as stipulated by the Apocalypse Clause in their prenup. She had the board install an interim CEO, a steady hand to guide the company out of the chaos Howard had created. Howard was left with a fraction of his former fortune and a reputation shattered beyond repair. Chloe Sterling vanished last heard of boarding a flight to Dubai, the fake pregnancy and Cartier necklace, her only parting gifts from a life she almost had. Months later, Yasmin stood in the nursery of the penthouse. The room was bathed in the soft afternoon light, decorated in serene shades of cream and blue. In her arms, she held her son Daniel Vanderbilt Redford. He was small, perfect, and blessedly real. He had his father's stormy eyes, but Yasmin hoped he would have her strength, her perception. She looked out at the city, no longer a cage or a battlefield, but simply a view. It was the backdrop to her new life, a life she had seized from the wreckage of a lie. She was not just a wife or a mother. She was the architect of her own future, a matriarch in the making, proving that the deepest betrayals can sometimes forge the strongest survivors. Thank you for listening to this story of love, betrayal, and ultimate revenge. The story of Yasmin Redford reminds us that strength isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise. She turned her pain into power and rewrote her own ending. 7 months pregnant. Emery Thorne was no longer the perfect accessory for her millionaire husband. Her crime, a 30-pound weight gain that came with nurturing his unborn child. His verdict, exile. As the cold wrought iron gates of their palatial New York estate slammed shut behind her, another woman was already stepping into her life, her shoes and her husband's private jet. This isn't just a story of unfathomable betrayal. It's the story of a woman left with nothing but the fierce protective love for her baby, a woman who decided that from the ashes of her perfect life, she wouldn't just rise, she would build an empire and take back everything. The air in the penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park was still always chilled to a precise 68 degrees Fahrenheit, the way Damien Thorne liked it. It was an atmosphere that seemed to seep into the very bones of the place, a sterile perfection that mirrored its owner. From the outside, Damien and Emery Thorne were the city's golden couple. He, a self-made real estate magnate with a jawline as sharp as his business acumen and a portfolio that glittered with skyscrapers and luxury resorts. She, the beautiful, doe-eyed philanthropist whose grace and quiet elegance made her the perfect counterpart to his ambition. Their life was a meticulously curated series of events, galas at the Met Summers in the Hamptons, spontaneous shopping trips to Paris, and Christmases spent on the sun-drenched beaches of St. Bart's. They were regulars at restaurants like Per Se and Daniel, where their table was always waiting. Their world was one of bespoke suits, Hermes Birkin bags that Emery collected with the disinterest of a child collecting stamps and the constant subtle hum of the engine of their Rolls-Royce Phantom as it navigated the city streets. Damien didn't just like beautiful things, he demanded them. He saw his life as a brand, and every element within it, including his wife, had to be flawless. Emery had met Damien when she was a budding art historian consulting for a gallery he had acquired. He was captivated by her knowledge, her quiet confidence, and of course her willowy, Audrey Hepburn-like frame. He pursued her with the same single-minded intensity he applied to his business deals. He showered her with gifts, whisked her away on his jet, a sleek Gulfstream G650ER he'd christened the Titan, and made her believe she was the center of his universe. She fell in love not with the wealth, but with the man she thought he was decisive, protective, and brilliant. They married in a lavish ceremony at the Oaxaca Castle on Long Island, a fairy tale event that was the talk of the society pages for months. For the first 3 years the fairy tale held. Emery learned to navigate his moods, his obsession with control, and his almost pathological need for order. She organized their homes, the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, the Aspen Chalet, with military precision. She hosted flawless dinner parties, charmed his business partners, and never ever had a hair out of place. She was in every sense Mrs. Damien Thorne, a perfect reflection of his success. The first hint of a crack in their gilded cage came with the 2 pink lines on a pregnancy test. Emery was overjoyed. She had longed for a child, for a warmth to fill the sometimes lonely spaces of their cavernous homes. When she told Damien, he was initially ecstatic. A son and heir to the Thorn Empire was the one acquisition he hadn't yet made. A boy, of course, he'd declared, pouring 2 glasses of vintage Dom Perignon, pushing one towards her before retracting it. "Oh, right. Not for you. We'll get you some sparkling cider. We'll have to plan the nursery. I want the best. Italian furniture, hand-painted murals. Nothing is too good for my son." The joy, however, was short-lived. It began to curdle as Emery's body began to change. The first trimester was a blur of morning sickness that left her pale and exhausted. Damien's patience wore thin. "Are you still sick?" he'd ask, his tone laced with annoyance as he fastened the cuff of his Richard Mille watch. "You need to get a handle on this, Emery. We have the Anderson charity benefit on Friday. You can't be seen looking so green." She tried. She forced down crackers, sipped ginger ale, and plastered a smile on her face for the cameras. But as she moved into her second trimester, the sickness subsided, and a new problem emerged: her appetite. For the first time in her life, Emery was truly hungry. The carefully controlled diet of salads and grilled fish that had maintained her size 0 figure was no longer enough. She craved pasta, bread, fruit, the very things Damien had always referred to as filler. And with the cravings came the weight. A gentle rounding of her belly at first, which Damien found novel. He'd place a proprietary hand on it at parties, a proud patriarch in waiting. But then her hips began to widen, her face lost its sharp, angular quality, and her breasts swelled. The comments started subtly. "Are you sure you need a second helping of that, darling? Think of the baby," he'd say, a charming smile playing on his lips that didn't reach his cold, assessing eyes. "Those trousers seem a bit snug. Perhaps we should have your stylist bring over some more accommodating pieces. Maternity wear. But something chic, of course." Emery tried to brush it off. Pregnancy was a natural process. Women gained weight. It was for their child, their son. But Damien's remarks grew more frequent, more pointed. He would watch her eat, his gaze critical, making her feel gluttonous and ashamed for nourishing his own child. One evening, as she was getting ready for a dinner at Jean-Georges, she stood before the full-length mirror in their dressing room. She was 5 months pregnant now, and a soft, undeniable bump pushed against the silk of her custom-made gown. She felt a surge of love for the life inside her, a fluttering kick that made her gasp with a quiet joy. Damien walked in, adjusting his bow tie. He stopped and stared at her reflection. His face, usually a mask of cool control, twisted into a look of genuine distaste. "My God, Emery," he said, the words sharp as shards of glass. "Look at you. You're letting yourself go completely." The joy she'd felt moments before evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. "Damien, I'm pregnant. I'm supposed to gain weight. The doctor says I'm perfectly healthy." "I don't care what the doctor says," he snapped, walking over to her. He didn't touch her belly. Instead, he pinched the flesh at her waist. "This is just sloppy. I married a thoroughbred, not a broodmare. You have to maintain some standards." Tears pricked her eyes. "How can you say that? This is our baby. And you think our baby wants a mother who looks like this? You're an extension of me, Bella. When people look at you, they're looking at my judgment, my taste. And right now what I see is a lack of discipline." The words struck her with physical force. It wasn't about her health or the baby's. It was about his image. She was a painting he had bought, and now in his eyes the canvas was warping. The next 2 months were a descent into a quiet, private hell. Damien put her on a strict diet monitored by their private chef. He scheduled mandatory sessions with a personal trainer who specialized in prenatal containment. He would weigh her not in the privacy of their bathroom but in the home gym, marking the number on a whiteboard as if she were a failing stock. Her weight gain slowed, but it didn't stop. She was growing a human being and her body was doing what it was designed to do. But every pound was a new failure in Damien's eyes. He stopped touching her. The proprietary hand on her belly was gone. He slept on the far edge of their California king bed, a chasm of cold sheets between them. Their social life dwindled. He made excuses to attend events alone, claiming she needed her rest. In reality, Emery knew he was ashamed to be seen with her. The golden couple was tarnished. The isolation was suffocating. Their friends were his friends. Their world, his world. Who could she turn to? Admitting the truth that her billionaire husband was starving her, weighing her like livestock, felt insane. They would never believe it. They only saw the charming, successful Damien Thorne, the man who gifted hospitals and funded orphanages. They didn't see the tyrant who reigned within the pristine walls of their penthouse. She began to notice a new name appearing on his phone, a notification that would flash and be dismissed with a flick of his thumb, Amber. When she once casually asked who it was, he gave her a look that froze the question on her lips. "A business associate," he said curtly. "Don't pry." But Emery saw the late-night texts, the sly smiles he'd give his phone when he thought she wasn't looking. A quick search on Instagram revealed the truth. Amber Rayton was a model and influencer, all long limbs, surgically enhanced curves, and a permanently vacant pout. Her feed was a monument to narcissism, bikini shots in exotic locations, champagne glasses held in perfectly manicured hands, and captions filled with vapid pseudo-philosophy. She was everything Emery was not: brazen, artificial, and unapologetically transactional. And Emery noticed with a sinking heart, she was a size 00, the perfect unchanging accessory. Emery was now 7 months pregnant. She had gained 30 pounds, a number Damien recited with the same disgust he might use for a catastrophic business loss. The love she once felt for him had withered, replaced by fear and a growing, simmering resentment. She was no longer just fighting for her own dignity. She was fighting for the health of her unborn child. She started to sneak food, hiding granola bars in her closets and eating chocolate in the bathroom like a guilty teenager. The shame was immense, but the primal need to nourish her baby was stronger. The fairy tale was over. She was living in a beautiful, expensive cage with a keeper who was growing more monstrous by the day. She didn't know it yet, but the door to that cage was about to be flung open, not into freedom, but into a cold, unforgiving abyss. The breaking point arrived, as it so often does, under the glittering chandeliers of a public spectacle. It was the annual fundraising gala for the New York Children's Foundation, an event the Thornes had chaired for the past 2 years. This year, Damien had tried to get out of it. "You're in no condition to be seen, Emery," he'd stated, not asked, a week before the event. He was scrolling through stock reports on his tablet, not even bothering to look at her. She was sitting on the chaise lounge in their bedroom, her swollen ankles propped up on a pillow. "It's for the Children's Foundation, Damien," she replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm on the board. Not showing up would be a scandal. People will talk." "Let them talk," he scoffed. "Better they speculate than they see this." He made a vague, dismissive gesture in her direction. A spark of defiance, long dormant, ignited within her. "I'm going," she said, her voice firmer this time. "I have a dress. It's been tailored. I will look perfectly acceptable." Damien finally looked up from his tablet. His eyes narrowed into icy slits. "Fine," he hissed. "But if you embarrass me, Emery, I swear to you there will be consequences." The night of the gala, a palpable tension filled the penthouse. Emery had spent hours with her hair and makeup team, who worked miracles to give her a radiant glow, artfully contouring her face to minimize the pregnancy-induced roundness. The dress was a deep emerald velvet, custom designed by Oscar de la Renta's atelier to be both elegant and forgiving. It draped over her 7-month bump, a statement of regal motherhood rather than a concession to it. For a fleeting moment, looking in the mirror, she felt a flicker of her old self, a woman of grace and power. The flicker died the moment Damien saw her. He walked out of his dressing room, resplendent in a Tom Ford tuxedo, and stopped dead. He didn't say a word. He simply let his eyes travel over her from her carefully coiffed hair, down to the swell of her belly, and his lip curled in a silent sneer. It was more devastating than any insult he could have hurled. The ride to the Cipriani Ballroom on Wall Street was silent and cold. Emery stared out at the blurred city lights, her hand resting protectively on her stomach where her baby was kicking gently, oblivious to the storm brewing outside. They made their entrance to a flurry of camera flashes and fawning greetings. Damien slipped on his public mask with practiced ease. He smiled, shook hands, and placed a possessive arm around Emery's waist, pulling her close. To the outside world, they were the picture of a devoted, expectant couple. But Emery could feel the rigidity in his arm, the way his fingers dug into her side, a private signal of his displeasure. "Smile, darling," he whispered in her ear, his breath warm, but his words frigid. "You look like you're heading to a funeral." She forced her lips into a smile, her cheeks aching with the effort. They navigated the crowded room, a constellation of New York's elite. Women in couture gowns air-kissed her cheeks, their eyes darting to her stomach with a mixture of curiosity and pity. Emery had known these people for years, had sat on committees and planned charity auctions with them. Tonight she felt like a complete stranger, a specimen under a microscope. The first hour was a torturous performance. Emery managed to make small talk to discuss the Foundation's latest initiatives to graciously accept congratulations on the baby. But she was acutely aware of Damien's constant surveillance. When she reached for a canapé, a single harmless-looking bacon-wrapped date, his hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. "Remember your discipline, Emery," he murmured, his voice dangerously low. He smiled at a passing acquaintance. "My wife has been so careful with her diet. For the baby, you know." Humiliation washed over her, hot and suffocating. She retracted her hand as if burned, her appetite vanishing completely. The true disaster began during the live auction. Damien, as the event chair, was on stage working the crowd with his signature brand of arrogant charm. Emery sat at their prime table near the front, flanked by a banking CEO and a shipping heiress. She felt a wave of dizziness, a consequence of her husband's enforced starvation diet, and reached for her water glass. Her phone sitting on the table buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram. Normally she would have ignored it, but a strange compulsion made her pick it up. A new post from a user she didn't follow had tagged her. Her blood ran cold when she saw the username, @AmberRaytonOfficial. With a trembling finger she opened the post. It was a story. A fleeting video that would disappear in 24 hours but felt as permanent as a scar. Amber Rayton, the model from Damien's phone, was pouting at the camera. She was in what was unmistakably the back of a luxury car, the bespoke cream leather and polished wood trim of the Thorne family Rolls-Royce. The video was shot from a low angle, showing off her cleavage in a tight, revealing dress. She didn't speak. She just winked, then panned the camera to the side. For a fraction of a second, the sleeve of a man's tuxedo came into view, a Tom Ford tuxedo identical to the one Damien was wearing on stage not 50 feet away. The caption was a single taunting word, "soon." And tagged in the post were two accounts, @Damien Thorne and @Emery Thorne. The air rushed out of Emery's lungs. This wasn't just an affair. This was a declaration of war. Amber hadn't just posted this for her followers. She had sent it directly to Emery, a digital poisoned arrow aimed straight at her heart in the middle of her husband's keynote event. The timing was malicious, designed for maximum impact, for maximum humiliation. It was a power play, a move to show Emery that she was being replaced, and the woman replacing her was already in her car, in her life. Emery felt the room tilt. The auctioneer's voice, Damien's voice, the chatter of the crowd, it all faded into a dull roar. The woman next to her, the shipping heiress, glanced over. "Emery, dear, are you all right? You've gone white as a sheet." Emery couldn't answer. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a clatter that drew a few stares. She had to get out. She had to breathe. Turning her back on the stage where her husband was auctioning off a week-long stay at their St. Bart's villa, she fled. She stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors of the historic building, her velvet gown feeling like a lead weight. She found a deserted side exit and pushed it open, stepping out into the cold, damp night air of a lower Manhattan alleyway. The stench of garbage and stale beer was a grotesque contrast to the perfumed air of the ballroom. She leaned against the cold brick wall, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. Betrayal was a physical thing, a crushing weight on her chest. It wasn't just the cheating. It was the audacity, the cruelty, the public nature of it all. This was a coordinated attack, and she knew with sickening certainty that Damien was a part of it. The tuxedo sleeve was no coincidence. Amber was his guest, hidden away somewhere waiting. Minutes later, the heavy door creaked open again. It was Damien. The charming mask was gone, replaced by a face contorted with pure fury. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" he spat, advancing on her. "You walk out in the middle of my speech. You make a scene. Do you have any idea how that looks?" Emery held up her phone, her hand shaking so violently she could barely hold it steady. She showed him Amber's post. "This Damien. This is what I'm doing. Who is she? And why is she in our car tagging me on social media?" He glanced at the phone and his expression didn't shift. There was no surprise, no denial, only cold, hard annoyance. "Her name is Amber," he said, as if explaining a tedious business detail. "And you are overreacting." "Overreacting?" Emery's voice cracked, a mixture of disbelief and hysteria. "She is publicly humiliating me, humiliating us, and you're letting her—" "She's a part of my life now, Emery," he said, his voice dropping to a chillingly calm tone. "It's time you accepted that. Look at you." He gestured to her body with open contempt. "You've become a liability, an embarrassment. You're emotional, you're bloated, you're not the woman I married." Each word was a hammer blow. "I am carrying your child," she shrieked, the sound echoing in the narrow alley. "Don't you dare use that as an excuse," he roared, his composure finally breaking. "You think that gives you a free pass to turn into this cow? I gave you everything, Emery, a perfect life, and all you had to do was maintain your end of the bargain. You had to be beautiful. You couldn't even do that." The raw, unfiltered cruelty of his words finally broke through her shock and grief, replacing it with a white-hot rage. "The bargain?" she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. "Was that the bargain, Damien? To be your pretty, silent, anorexic doll? To be an object on your shelf that you could discard the moment it showed a single imperfection?" "Yes," he shouted, his face inches from hers. "That was the bargain, and you broke it." He turned to go back inside. "Clean yourself up and get back to the table. We will discuss your future later." But Emery didn't move. The spell was broken. The man she had loved, the life she had lived, it was all a lie. A beautifully constructed, soul-crushing lie. She stared at the closed door, the muffled sounds of applause filtering through. He had gone back to his adoring crowd, leaving her in the filth of the alley. She was no longer just in a cage. She was being cast out of it. And as the first drops of a cold rain began to fall, she knew the discussion about her future would not be a negotiation. It would be a sentencing. The drive home was a silent tableau of impending doom. Damien sat in the front with the driver, his back ramrod straight, refusing to even acknowledge her presence. Emery huddled in the expansive backseat of the Rolls-Royce, the same car Amber had been in just hours before, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. She felt contaminated, a trespasser in her own life. The plush leather seats seemed to mock her, a reminder of a world she no longer belonged to. When they arrived at their private elevator that led directly into the penthouse, Damien finally spoke. His voice was devoid of all emotion, flat and final. "Pack a bag," he said, not looking at her, as he strode towards the bar and poured himself a large scotch. Emery stood frozen in the marble-floored foyer. "What are you talking about, Damien?" He took a long swallow of his drink before turning to face her. His eyes were as dead as a winter sky. "I am talking about the end of this. The end of us. I want you out. Tonight." The words hung in the sterile air. Out. Just like that. Her mind struggled to process the finality of it. "Out." Where am I supposed to go? I'm 7 months pregnant with your child. You can't just throw me out on the street. A humorless laugh escaped his lips. Watch me. I can, and I will. You are no longer my wife, Emery. You are a problem I am solving. As for the child, he swirled the amber liquid in his glass. My lawyers will be in touch. I will of course provide for my son, but I will not have his mother be you, not like this. The sheer arrogance, the cold-blooded transactional nature of his decision was breathtaking. He was severing her from her life as cleanly as a surgeon excising a tumor. You can't do this, she whispered, tears finally streaming down her face, tracing paths through her expensive makeup. We have a life together. We have history. I love you. The last words came out as a desperate, pathetic plea, and she hated herself for it. No, he said, placing his glass down with a decisive click. You loved the life I gave you, and that life is over. You made your choice when you decided to let yourself fall apart. I'm making mine. He glanced at his watch. I have a car waiting downstairs in 30 minutes. Be in it, or my security will escort you out. He turned and walked into his study, closing the heavy oak doors behind him, the sound of the latch clicking into place like the door of a prison cell. Emery stood alone in the cavernous living room, surrounded by millions of dollars of art furniture and memories that now felt like props from a stranger's play. The shock was so profound it was almost paralyzing. 30 minutes. 30 minutes to dismantle a life, to pack away a future. She stumbled towards their bedroom, a magnificent suite with panoramic views of the park, the king-sized bed, the silk sheets, the walk-in closet the size of a small apartment. It was all part of the set. Her closet was a temple of couture, a rainbow of Chanel, Dior, and Valentino. Shoes she'd never worn, purses that cost more than a car. It was all meaningless. With numb fingers, she pulled out a single suitcase. What did one pack for an eviction? She grabbed a few simple, comfortable maternity dresses, a pair of flat shoes, her toiletries. She saw the emerald velvet gown from the gala crumpled on a chair, a sad, discarded symbol of her final humiliation. She left it there. Her eyes fell on the jewelry box on her vanity. Inside lay the breathtaking 10-carat diamond engagement ring Damien had placed on her finger, the sapphire necklace he'd given her for their first anniversary, the pearls, the emeralds. For a moment, a spiteful urge rose in her to sweep them all into her bag. They were worth a fortune. But the thought made her feel sick. They weren't gifts of love. They were investments, part of the price of owning her. She slammed the box shut. She would take nothing that tied her to him. Her hand went instead to a small, worn wooden box tucked away in a drawer. Inside was a handful of items that were truly hers. A locket with a picture of her parents, a faded postcard from her college study abroad trip to Florence, a small silver charm bracelet she'd had since she was a girl. These were the remnants of the woman she was before she became Mrs. Damien Thorne. She swept them into her handbag. As she zipped the suitcase, a wave of gut-wrenching sobs overtook her. She sank to the floor, her body shaking, her arms wrapped around her belly. It wasn't the loss of the wealth that broke her. It was the absolute annihilation of her reality. The man she had built a life with, the father of her child, had looked at her and seen nothing of value. He was discarding her as easily as he would a losing stock. A sharp knock on the bedroom door made her jump. It was one of Damien's security guards, a large, impassive man named Frank. "The car is ready, Mrs. Thorne," he said, his voice polite but firm. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "It's just Emery now, Frank," she said, her voice raw. She pulled herself to her feet, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Dignity. It was the only thing she had left. She walked out of the bedroom, pulling her small suitcase, and didn't look back. The living room was empty. Damien didn't even afford her the courtesy of a final goodbye. He remained hidden in his study, a coward hiding behind his wealth and his power. Frank escorted her to the service elevator, the one used by staff and for deliveries. The symbolism was not lost on her. She had entered this life through the front door, a bride on her husband's arm. She was leaving it through the back, like trash being taken out. The car waiting in the underground garage wasn't one of Damien's luxury vehicles. It was a standard black town car. The driver, another face she didn't recognize, opened the door for her without a word. As she slid in, her phone buzzed again. Another Instagram notification. She couldn't stop herself. She had to look. It was Amber Rayton again. This time it wasn't a story. It was a permanent post on her grid. The picture was a masterpiece of calculated cruelty. Amber, clad in a tiny bright yellow bikini, was lounging on the plush cream-colored leather seats of a private jet. Her body was tan-toned and impossibly slender. One hand was draped languidly over her flat stomach, while the other held a flute of champagne. Behind her, through the circular window, the city lights of Manhattan twinkled like a distant, forgotten world. Anyone who had ever seen a picture of Damien Thorne knew his jet. It was unmistakably the Titan. But it was the caption that delivered the final fatal blow. Up, up and away, spontaneous trip to St. Bart's to celebrate a new beginning. Out with the old, in with the new. Upgraded, #life. Is good, #no baggage. The hashtag no baggage was a deliberate, vicious jab. It was a clear reference to Emery, to her emotional baggage, to the physical baggage of her pregnant body. Emery stared at the screen, a low guttural sound of pure anguish escaping her lips. The picture had been posted just minutes ago. While she was being thrown out into the street, her replacement was boarding her husband's jet, heading to their vacation home, toasting a future that was supposed to have been hers. Damien hadn't even waited for her to be gone. The betrayal was so swift, so complete, it was almost surreal. He hadn't just moved on. He had orchestrated a seamless, brutal transition, ensuring his life of perfection continued without so much as a moment's interruption. The car pulled out of the garage and into the rain-slicked streets of the city. Emery looked at her own reflection in the window. A pale, tear-streaked face, a woman with a single suitcase and a baby on the way, cast out into the night. Then she looked back down at the phone, at the image of the tanned, bikini-clad mistress in the private jet. The grief for a moment was a physical inferno threatening to consume her entirely. But then something else began to flicker in the embers. A tiny spark of something cold and hard and furious. He had called her a liability, an embarrassment, baggage. He had thrown her away. He had forgotten one crucial thing. This baggage he'd discarded had a heartbeat. Two, in fact. Her own and the strong, steady one of the child nestled inside her. And a mother's love she was beginning to realize could be the most dangerous force in the world. He had taken her life, but he had given her a reason to fight. And as the town car sped away into the darkness, leaving the glittering spire of her former home behind, Emery Thorne made a silent vow to her unborn child. They would be back, and they would not be asking for permission. They would be taking what was theirs. The war was not over. It had just begun. The first 24 hours were a free fall through a disorienting fog of despair and disbelief. The anonymous town car deposited Emery on the curb of a Harrison hotel in Midtown, a monument to beige functionality. The driver didn't help with her single suitcase. He simply popped the trunk and sped away, severing her final link to the world she once knew. The lobby was a sea of neutral tones, smelling faintly of industrial cleaner and the burnt coffee of weary travelers. It was clean, efficient, and utterly devoid of soul, a stark, brutal contrast to the bespoke floral arrangements and hushed elegance of her former home. Checking in felt like a surreal, out-of-body experience. As the indifferent clerk tapped at his keyboard, Emery stared at her own reflection in the polished brass of the check-in counter. Her face was pale and puffy, her eyes raw from crying, her couture maternity dress now looking absurdly out of place. She gave her maiden name Emery Hayes, and the name felt foreign on her tongue, a ghost from a past life. She paid for a single night with the emergency visa she'd kept from her pre-Damien life. Her fingers trembling as she slid it across the counter, praying it wouldn't be declined. The room was suffocatingly small. A queen bed with a stiff patterned duvet, a dark wood desk scarred with the rings of other people's glasses, and a single window that offered a dismal view of a soot-stained brick wall. The air was thick with a stale, recycled chill. This was it. This was the abyss. She sank onto the edge of the bed, the mattress groaning under her weight, and the sheer totality of her fall from grace crashed down on her. Just last night she had slept on fret linens in a penthouse that floated above the city lights. Tonight her world had shrunk to this sterile 10 by 12-foot box. She was an exile, a non-person. Mrs. Thorne, the society hostess, the patron of the arts, the woman whose opinion on table settings was once breathlessly quoted in magazines, had been summarily executed. In her place was a 7 months pregnant woman with one suitcase, a dwindling bank account, and a future as blank and grim as the brick wall outside her window. Driven by a masochistic compulsion, she opened her phone. The screen glowed a portal to the life that was no longer hers. Amber Rayton's Instagram account was a vibrant, sun-drenched spectacle of cruelty. Each new post was a meticulously crafted torment. There was Amber laughing on the deck of Damien's yacht, the Tempest, the turquoise waters of St. Bart's sparkling behind her. Emery's heart seized. She and Damien had spent their second anniversary on that very yacht. There was Amber raising a glass of rosé at a table at Eden Rock, the caption, a gushing tribute to the most romantic dinner ever. That was Emery's favorite table, the one with the perfect view of the sunset over the bay. Damien had always made sure they had it. Then came the photo that made her physically sick. Amber posing for a selfie in what was clearly the master suite of the St. Bart's villa. Draped around her tanned, slender neck was a delicate vintage diamond necklace from Van Cleef & Arpels. A third anniversary gift. Emery had agonized over leaving it behind, and now here it was adorning the throat of her replacement. Damien hadn't just given it to her. He must have had it flown out specifically for her, a deliberate desecration of their shared history. The comments section was a dizzying mix of fawning praise and hungry speculation. You are living the dream. Who is this mystery billionaire spoiling you? A few astute followers tagged Damien, but the comments were quickly deleted, scrubbed clean by some unseen digital janitor. Then Emery saw it, a comment from a burner account, a faceless profile with 0 posts. Looks like he traded in a Rolls-Royce for a rental. Enjoy it while it lasts, sweetheart. Trophies get dusty. The comment was a tiny pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness. Someone else saw it. Someone else knew. She screenshotted it just before it vanished, holding on to it like a talisman. Morning came, but with it no relief, only the cold, sharp edge of reality. Her phone buzzed, not with a call, but with a text. It was from an unknown number, clinical and devoid of any human warmth. Your personal credit cards and associated bank accounts have been frozen effective immediately pending divorce proceedings. A monthly stipend of $5,000 for living and prenatal expenses will be deposited into a new account. Details to follow via post. Do not attempt to contact Mr. Thorne directly. All future communication must be directed through our office. Latham & Watkins, LLP. The message was a second eviction, a financial one. She opened her banking app and saw a string of zeros where a fortune had been the day before. She tried to purchase a bottle of water from the minibar using her Amex Centurion card, the black card that was a symbol of her status, and the transaction was as expected declined. The humiliation was absolute. $5,000 a month. It was a calculated cruelty, a pittance designed not for her survival, but for her subjugation. It was a leash long enough to prevent her from starving on the street where she might cause a scene, but short enough to ensure she could never mount a meaningful defense. It was control, pure and simple. Her first call was to her parents in Connecticut. Her mother's cheerful, "Hello," shattered into horrified silence as Emery, her voice cracking, recounted the nightmare of the past 48 hours. The words tumbled out the gala, the alleyway, the Instagram posts, the cold final command to pack a bag. That monster! Her father seethed in the background. I'm coming to get you right now. You're coming home, Bella. The offer of her childhood bed, of her mother's gentle care, was a powerful siren song. But as she looked at her reflection in the dark hotel room window, her hand resting on the firm swell of her belly, she knew she couldn't go back. To retreat to her parents' home would be to accept defeat, to regress into the role of the broken child. Her own child, this innocent life inside her, deserved a mother who was a fighter, not a refugee. I can't, Dad, she said, her voice finding a sliver of strength. I have to stay here, in New York. This is where it happened, and this is where I have to fix it. Her second call was to Chloe Devereaux. Chloe, a sharp-witted art dealer who had married into a notoriously stuffy old-money family, had always been an ally, a fellow traveler in the gilded cages of Manhattan's elite. Bella, my God, where are you? Chloe's voice was a welcome balm of genuine concern. Damien put out a story that you were ordered on complete bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. I knew it was bull. He looked like a cat that swallowed a canary at the gala after you left. This time Emery didn't cry. She laid out the facts with a cold, clear precision that surprised even herself. The affair, the public humiliation, the eviction, the financial leash. When she finished, the silence on the other end of the line was heavy and dangerous. That pathologically narcissistic son of a bitch. Chloe finally spat the words laced with venom. I never trusted him. He always looked at you like he was assessing his portfolio. Okay, new plan. Where are you? Emery told her the name of the hotel. Absolutely not. You are not staying in some godforsaken tourist trap where the bed probably has a 5-star rating on Bedbug Advisor. I'm sending my driver Stefan. He'll be there in 20 minutes. Pack your bag. And for the love of God, Emery, get off Instagram. Stop drinking the poison he's serving. An hour later, Emery was stepping out of a discreet black SUV and into a different world. Chloe hadn't taken her to her own sprawling Park Avenue apartment, but to a charming private garden apartment on a tree-lined street in the West Village. It was a world away from the cold modernism of the penthouse. It had warm hardwood floors, overflowing bookshelves, and a cozy fireplace. A small private garden at the back was filled with pots of herbs and late-blooming roses. It felt like a home, not a showroom. It's an investment property, Chloe explained, pulling Emery into a fierce, protective hug. It's yours, for as long as you need it. No rent, no questions. Consider it a grant from the Women Scorned by Vile Billionaires Emergency Fund. Now, she said, leading Emery to a comfortable armchair. First things first, we need a lawyer. Not one of the silk-stocking guys who plays golf with Damien's buddies. We need a shark. We need a woman who will fillet him and serve him for lunch. Chloe was a force of nature. By that afternoon, she had secured an appointment with Thea Pappas, a divorce attorney so legendary and so feared that her name was only ever spoken in hushed, reverent tones. Her nickname in the legal community was the Widowmaker, for her uncanny ability to leave powerful, arrogant men legally and financially bereft. The meeting was the next day. Emery, dressed in the most professional-looking maternity dress she owned, felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Thea Pappas's office, in a sleek tower overlooking the Hudson, was the epitome of quiet, lethal power. No clutter, just clean lines, modern art, and a commanding view. Thea herself was in her late 50s with piercing blue eyes that missed nothing, a razor-sharp gray bob, and an aura of unshakable competence. She didn't offer fake sympathy. She offered Emery a glass of water and a comfortable chair. Ms. Devereaux gave me the broad strokes, Thea began, her voice calm and measured. But I need to hear it from you, from the beginning. Every detail, no matter how small or humiliating. Emery took a shaky breath. She started with the joy of her pregnancy, and then, her voice gaining a steely edge, she recounted the escalating cruelty, the weigh-ins, the dietary control, the constant criticism. She detailed the public humiliation at the gala, showing Thea the screenshots of Amber's taunting posts, the timestamp proof that her replacement was boarding the jet to St. Bart's while she was being thrown into the street. She finished with the lawyer's text, the financial guillotine. Thea listened without interruption. Her fingers steepled her gaze intense. When Emery fell silent, the attorney leaned back in her high-backed leather chair. A slow, thin smile touched her lips. "He is breathtakingly arrogant," Thea said, a glint of battle in her eyes. "And in my line of work, arrogance is a gift. It makes men sloppy. It makes them predictable. This is very good for us." "Good?" Emery asked, her voice a whisper. "He has everything. All the power, the best lawyers. He's left me with nothing." "He hasn't left you with nothing," Thea corrected her, leaning forward. Her voice was soft but held the resonance of steel. "He's left you with his child, his heir. In the state of New York, a judge will take a very dim view of a man who evicts his pregnant wife, and he's left you with a narrative. The beautiful, supportive wife cast aside during the most vulnerable time of her life for a cheap affair. The public humiliation, the meticulously timed Instagram posts. This isn't just a divorce, Mrs. Thorne. This is a story. And we are going to seize control of that story." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a fragile tendril of hope unfurled in Emery's chest. "He wants to play dirty," Thea continued, her voice hardening. "He thinks he can use his power to silence you. We'll use his power against him. We file for divorce immediately. The grounds will be adultery and extreme mental cruelty. We subpoena everything his and Ms. Rayton's phone records, text messages, emails. Travel manifests for the Gulf Stream. Credit card statements for the no-limit Amex he gave her. We will build an irrefutable timeline of this affair, proving it was a long-term calculated conspiracy to replace you. We will paint a picture of a monster so obsessed with his public image that he emotionally abused and starved his pregnant wife." Thea stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city. "He thinks he can buy your silence with $5,000 a month. He wants to drag this out, bleed you dry. We're going to make this divorce so public, so messy, and so financially catastrophic that his board of directors will get stomach ulcers. His shareholders will demand he settle. We are not aiming for a fair settlement, Emery. We are aiming for a punitive one. One that provides for you and your child for the rest of your lives and makes Damien Thorne think twice before he ever treats another human being like a disposable asset." The weeks that followed were a strange dichotomy. In the quiet sanctuary of the West Village apartment, Emery began the slow, arduous process of healing. Guided by Chloe's fierce friendship, she found a therapist who specialized in trauma and emotional abuse. She joined a prenatal yoga studio nearby, feeling a sense of community with the other expectant mothers, their bodies all changing in beautiful, unique ways. She rediscovered the simple, grounding pleasure of cooking for herself, visiting the local farmer's market, and finding joy in the vibrant colors of fresh produce, a world away from the bland, restrictive diet Damien had enforced. She was slowly, carefully rediscovering Emery Hayes. Simultaneously, the legal war raged. Damien's high-powered lawyers at Latham & Watkins were every bit as aggressive as Thea had predicted. They filed motion after motion, trying to bury her team in paperwork. Their first settlement offer was a joke, a lump sum that wouldn't even cover the cost of the art in her old living room, contingent on a draconian non-disclosure agreement that would have forbidden her from ever speaking about her marriage. Thea Papa sent it back with a single handwritten note: "You can't be serious." Then came discovery. Thea's team of forensic accountants and investigators were relentless, and they found gold. Text messages between Damien and Amber that were more damning than Emery could have imagined. Damien complaining about the bloated liability and her endless whining. Amber and Damien openly joking about the perfect timing of the gala incident, planning it like a marketing campaign. They found receipts for the Miami condo for lavish gifts for secret vacations that had stretched back over a year. It was all there. Proof. The pain of reading it was immense, but it was overshadowed by a profound, clarifying vindication. She wasn't crazy. It was all real. Armed with this evidence, Thea's team began to fight back, not just in the courtroom, but in the court of public opinion. Anonymous, carefully selected details were leaked to veteran gossip columnists. the narrative began to shift. The initial story of a billionaire trading up for a younger model was replaced by whispers of shocking cruelty. The phrase "abused his pregnant wife" began appearing in headlines. Amber Rayton, once the triumphant victor, found the comments on her Instagram feed turning from adoration to vitriol. Her carefully curated image was crumbling. Damien, accustomed to absolute control, was apoplectic. His clean, swift execution of his marriage had devolved into a bloody public war. His company's stock, once impervious, took a small but noticeable hit. The brand of Damien Thorne was becoming toxic. One cool autumn evening, as Emery was walking home from her yoga class, feeling a moment of genuine peace, she saw him. He was leaning against a black Mercedes parked just down the street from her apartment building, his face etched with a fury and exhaustion she had never seen before. Her breath caught, but the old fear was gone, replaced by a cold, steady calm. She continued walking, her hand resting on her belly. "Emery," he called out, his voice strained. "We need to talk." She didn't stop. "We have nothing to talk about, Damien. If you want to communicate, you can speak to my lawyer." He moved quickly, blocking her path and grabbing her arm. "This has gone too far. The leaks, the newspapers. You're trying to ruin me." She stopped and slowly looked down at his hand gripping her arm. Then she lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes were clear and direct. "You threw me out of our home while I was carrying your child," she said, her voice quiet but unwavering. "You allowed your mistress to publicly taunt and humiliate me. You cut me off financially and tried to erase me from my own life. Don't you dare talk to me about ruining people." His face fell, his arrogance momentarily punctured by the simple, unassailable truth of her words. She pulled her arm from his grasp with a finality that startled him. "You did this to yourself," she said, stepping around him. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go rest. It's what's best for your son." She walked into her building without looking back, leaving him standing alone on the darkening sidewalk. For the first time in his meticulously curated life, Damien Thorne looked utterly and completely defeated. The power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. He had started a fire, certain she would be consumed by the flames. He had never once imagined that she would emerge from them, not burned but forged into something stronger than he could ever comprehend. Emery's journey from a discarded wife to a symbol of resilience captivated the city. Her story wasn't just about a marriage falling apart. It was a powerful testament to a woman's strength in the face of unimaginable cruelty and public humiliation. She transformed her pain into power, her despair into determination. While Damien's carefully constructed empire began to show deep, irreparable cracks under the weight of his own arrogance and the public scandal, Emery focused on building a new life, one of authenticity, strength, and most importantly, love for her soon-to-be-born child. Her fight was for more than just a settlement. It was for her identity, her future, and for the right to define her own worth beyond the shadow of a powerful man. What do you believe is the ultimate justice in a story like this? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If Emery's story of strength and transformation resonated with you, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their own inner power, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss the fallout and the final chapter of this incredible real-life drama.